So I've been asked to speak about community rehabilitation, but I knew that we were having the consumers, and I've spoken a lot to Caroline about her experience. So I thought rather than focusing on what happens for people who go home in the community, I would instead talk about one of my most passionate topics, and that is what happens in aged care. I wasn't sure if anyone did care, and it's really exciting this morning because it's been mentioned so many times. So I'm really hoping that I can demystify and or maybe just share my frustrations with what happens today. So I thought I'd be slightly controversial and call it aged care who cares. So this is about rehabilitation for people living in aged care. So I'm from Otakahi, Christchurch, and I have a private company called On The Go Physio, and we contract primarily into aged care facilities. So myself and my team do 90 hours a week around the place in about 20 different facilities. So I hadn't really realised until lockdown when a lot of us started talking that we probably do the most in the country in terms of physiotherapy in aged care. And I'm very much a clinician. So there's been some really interesting research presented this morning, but I'm talking to you about my clinical experience. And I am here as well on behalf of Physio New Zealand, but in case I get too feisty, I just want to say these views are my own. What I also want to say and really acknowledge is that people's experiences throughout the country are different. So even today, lining up for morning tea, someone's telling me what happens in their region, which is different from what happens in ours. So there might be some things I say and you say, that's not what happens with us. So I just want to acknowledge that now. Okay. So who listens to Brené Brown? Excuse me 1 second. I think this is my... Sorry, I've gone really fast. This is my old version.
Oh, you didn't send me a new version?
I think that's below. Okay, don't worry. I had one with lots of pretty pictures. What I had before this slide was a question. And the question, I can't remember all the headings now, but it was about aged care, who cares? And it gave me 5 options. So let's see if I can remember them. I'd like you to put up your hand. So, who cares? Put up your hand if you actually don't care about what happens to people that go to aged care. Wonderful. You don't care. Mari doesn't care.
Well, if you asked me if I did care.
No, you don't care. Were you wondering why you were the only person who put up your hand for a second? I'm introducing you at Physio conference on Saturday morning, Nari, so just, yes, Nari. Okay, so other than Nari, everyone in this room cares. Okay, so that's a really good starter. So secondly, who does care but really just doesn't know what goes on in aged care? Okay. So there's a chunk of us. And then who cares and confidently feels that their pathways and their protocols actually are pretty good when someone's discharged to aged care? And there should be people in the room. I've heard people tell me pretty good stuff. Okay. So, who likes Brené Brown?
I'm quite here, Jessie.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm getting lots of is that better there? Because I'm sure it's that. Yeah. Okay. So who likes Brené Brown? Anyone listen to Brené Brown podcast? Yeah, me too. So this is one from James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits, and I listened to this the other day and thought this actually summarises everything I want to say today. And that is that we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. Clever, eh? So what are our goals? Okay, do we know what our goals are? Actually we do, because in Aotearoa we have the Healthy Ageing Strategy, and our goal, everyone in this room, our goal is that older people live well, age well, and have respectful end of life in age-friendly communities. And so the third point there that I've highlighted is that this includes improving rehabilitation and recovery from acute episodes. We also have the Māori Health Strategy, and there it says that Māori families are supported to achieve their maximum health and wellbeing. So our goal is rehabilitation. What are our systems then? So I've put 4 systems in there. So one of these systems that I'm talking about is our aged care or our ART providers. Another system that we're trying to interact with is ACC. On my updated slide it doesn't say DHB, of course. And then there's private providers. So what I want to talk about a little bit is aged care, because I think we don't all understand this, and it's been sort of talked about a wee bit today. So in aged care or ARC, we have the villas, the townhouses, the studio apartments, the apartments. As Caroline's pointed out, people that live in these are fully independent. She said they might be living in a forest, but I think they might be living in their own homes as far as funding and accessibility and everything goes. We then have rest home level of care, and I can hear it's going in and out as well.
It's not.
Is it all right?
It's on.
Okay. So rest home level of care is ideally people who are independent-ish with only a little bit of help, but those who have worked in aged care know that over the last 10 years this has really changed. So now those people that are living in class as rest home level of care are a lot more dependent. We've then got hospital level of care. As a physio, when I work in aged care, I say if you need equipment or someone to help you, you really are hospital level of care. And then we've got dementia level of care, and that's got 2 levels, both the rest home or the hospital level of care there. And those services into aged care are governed by the ARC agreement. When we look at the ARC agreement in terms of what it says about physio, it says that you must provide the treatment program prescribed by a medical practitioner or nurse practitioner to assist the resident to develop and maintain functional ability. This may include goal and outcome orientated treatment such as physiotherapy. So when I read that sentence, my interpretation of that is whatever, do it like, okay, because there's nothing concrete in there. So what actually does happen then? When we look at aged care physio, there's absolutely no expectation in that contract on the frequency, the hours, and what's actually done. There's no specific funding in the contract. So when I talk to ARC providers, they say, yeah, we'd love physio, but no one funds it. So there's nothing specific in there. And there's no consistency throughout the country or even within regions. Okay. Some do employ a physio, and most contract us in, so you get a real mixture. So just with my company, On The Go Physio in Christchurch, we've got some facilities that have 2 hours a month of physio, and we've got some that have 20 hours a week. Which one do you want your mum to go to?
Yeah.
I don't think people know this. People don't know to ask it. The social workers don't always understand it. So that's one of my missions in life, is to get this question asked. Some have a physio assistant and some don't. Those that have got a physio assistant, your chances of getting anything done is so much higher. Because you don't need, someone was talking, Joe was talking about who needs to walk someone. You don't need a physio to get someone out of bed. Okay, so having somebody that's going to do the work, and you need the physios, because we do know what we're talking about most of the time, to do the thinking and the planning is really amazing. Some will provide physio if you're in hospital level of care, but not if you're in rest home level of care. And some will pass the costs on to the family. Payments of costs. So let's look about what happens in the DHB, where most of you are coming from, or DFAT order. There's no consistency in terms of ARC provision on a national scale. So some facilities, some regions, their community physios will go into aged care, and in some they won't. So that's really clear that we're not consistent there. And we know that DHBs provide inpatient rehabilitation for most people following hip fracture. And I didn't know those stats this morning. So that's really interesting to have a look at just how many people from ARC are offered acute, from leave acute and go back to ARC rather than having an inpatient stay. So let's have a little bit more of a look at what happens on the ground. So I put a call out to my physio colleagues on Facebook, and this was one of the comments. I work in orthopaedics in an unnamed place, and often as soon as the doctor knows our hospital level of care, they're sent back ASAP post-op, regardless of previous mobility level. Especially if there's pressure on beds, we don't get much of a chance. Rest home level might get a stay, but not always. Okay. And another physio who talked to me about her nana that lived in rest home care, had mild dementia but was independently walking. After her hip fracture, she sent back to her facility, which had no physio, with absolutely no rehab plan. The facility didn't know what to do with her. Her dementia did stop her living alone, but she could certainly follow directions and was a good candidate for rehab. They had assessed her on day 1 when she was still heavily sedated, and that's when they decided to send her back without rehab. Unfortunately for the hospital, this is my first vision. Unfortunately for the hospital that discharged her, I took that out. But this family included physio, GP and 2 nurses, so they arranged for a rehab and made a formal complaint. So let's talk about ACC, because people have talked about training for independence advisory service. To date, this has been really tricky. So it involves strong advocacy, and that's what I think's come through today from the injured person, their whānau, or the physio. Some clients, so when someone goes home or to aged care with a hip fracture, there's lots of things that can happen. One of them is that they or their family or the facility will get the sort of physio that you would get if you sprained your ankle, and that you would go to a physio and you'd pay a surcharge. So some arrange that we will come out and see them. They'll pay a surcharge and they can have up to 16 visits for that hip fracture. So that's sort of one class. Some will be referred for something called the Training for Independence Advisory Service. This has just changed its name, but we all know it as this. There's either 6 weeks or 6 hours or 12 hours, depending on what level. And an external physio provider will usually come and do that with the aim of returning to a level of independence. So when we work in aged care, if a musculoskeletal physio picks up their contract and comes into our rest home, they often don't know the systems, they don't know how to talk to caregivers, they don't know how to use the hoists. So as a company, even though we're predominantly private, we do try and get some of these contracts when they're outpatients. Some DHBs have really good systems for this. So people talk to me about having a dedicated ACC liaison person, sort of alongside the social workers. So when somebody has a fracture and they're going to be going back to ARC, the ACC liaison will arrange all the forms, fill in the paperwork. And there is this new thing called the NARP contract, which we'll talk about, or maybe not actually in a wee bit. So I just want to talk about my typical experience. This is so varied, which makes it impossible, I think. Kath's here, who works in the inpatients, and she said, can you explain to me again what happens in your rest homes? And every single one is different. But here's a typical experience. That I might have someone coming back to an aged care facility that only has physio once a month, and it happens to be that they've come back mid-month, so a couple of weeks later I'm there. There'll be a referral from the DHB physio that might say, please provide physio. So the aged care facility has been asked to provide physio, and officially if you go back to that contract, because it's being prescribed, it should be given, but it's not. And they might have a set of exercises for the caregivers to do, but the caregivers don't know how to do them. So at this stage, this person's been here for 2 weeks. Then I will attempt an ACC referral via email. If I've got a very, very long time, I might ring ACC as well and wait. And we can wait up to about 3 weeks is normal for that. So now this person's 5 weeks post-discharge. And we can now go in and provide some physio, but they've had a 5-week delay. Or they've died. I won't actually talk about this because I don't fully understand it. I read through the operational guidelines, which is the ACC new thing called NARP, which is a non-acute rehab pathways. But it is interesting, and if this is a field that you're in, you might want to know. Christchurch is doing this. It has a whole section on what should happen in aged care, and when I spoke to planning and funding in Christchurch, they've said we don't quite get it, so we're not doing it at this stage. So, what is the answer? I've given you lots of questions there. I think the answer is systems. To change something, we need to care enough to measure it, and we're starting to measure things specifically relating to aged care with the HIP registry. I'm really interested in those outcomes. I wonder if the mortality rates we look at are much higher when there's no physio provided later. We look a lot at inpatient, but I'm really interested to know if many of those deaths occur with people that don't get rehab when they leave. And I think we need systems that support our goal. So what we would like from our inpatient colleagues when they're considering discharging someone, Here we go. There's a lot in there, and it's all about establishing and asking questions, and it's establishing that previous level of mobility. So we sometimes get people sent back to us really immobile, who actually, even at the hospital level of care, they were walking independently beforehand, really establishing their potential, establishing their thoughts and their aspirations and their resources. So the reason I put resources in there is that some families will pay for a daily physio for their mum, and they don't know that it's an option for them. So they need to know that they can pay privately as well, and not just relying on ACC and the DHBs. Establish the best location for this to occur. And sometimes there was a discussion earlier on about should people stay in hospital a bit longer? Should we be giving people with dementia 10 weeks in rehab? Sometimes back where they came from is the best place, but the physio should maybe follow them there. It will be funded there. establish what we'd love is for you to establish what the ACC entitlements are for that person. And as I said, offer private funding or top-ups. People can have an ACC funded visit twice a week and they can still pay privately an extra 3 times a week. That's their right to do that. And ensure that our systems support this happening every time. So I know I've seen some really good pathways that say, if they're at hospital level of care, discharge day 3. The pathway doesn't say establish what their mobility is, establish the potential for rehab, it says discharge. And I think it's because we do not know what's going on in aged care. So aged care, who cares? This is Vern and he cares. He's 86, he fell with a left intertrochanteric fracture in May of this year. He had intramedullary fixation and was discharged as a full voice transfer from his hospital, and his wife was told he wouldn't walk again and no referrals were made for rehab. Fortunately, he was in the facility that has 20 hours of physio and 30 hours of physiotherapy assistant input, and now he walks without a frame. With an assistant because he's blind, or part of impaired vision. Okay, but this is full hoist, no rehab. But he went somewhere that did rehab him, and now he has excellent quality of life. And as the physio said to me, he laughs again. You know, his sense of humour's come back. It was Daffodil Day, which is why the caregiver has blue hair and colourful clothes, if you're wondering. It's a Ryman's facility, so normally those that know Ryman's, they wouldn't usually be colourful. So just going back to my question, who does care? I think every single person in this room does, and we know we do. And remember that we've stated that we do. We state that older people live well, age well, and have respectful end of life and age-friendly communities. But our systems really need to support this. Because I get passionate about things like this, and one of the things I think we need to improve is art, I didn't want to get up and criticise what happens in aged care. I think aged care is not in a great place at the moment, but one of the things we don't have is any consistency with what physio provision is. So I hassled our national body and said, would you please write some guidelines? And so they said, why don't you do it? So not only did I get involved in writing the guidelines, I then had to model on the cover and decided that I need to stand up straight and lose weight. But anyway, here we go. So these are available for aged care. They're 12 pages, so they're really easy to read, big print, nice headings. And it's a guide for managers of aged care facilities, but also for the rest of us, looking at what we should expect from aged care. I think, I've talked about the systems that we need. There's so many systems, and we need to chip away at them. So this is my mission has been chipping away at what we do in aged care, and this is sort of the first step for that. So I've said lots. I feel like I might have thrown down some challenges. I know we're going on to a general question session in a minute anyway, so I can stop there and save any questions. Or it's anything you want to my other presentation had pretty pictures of lots of people age 90. Check, no, that's fine. Because I sent it to you about midnight one night, yeah. But that's my jam. It's these 90-year-olds who are frail with a bit of dementia and who do incredibly well when we take the time and we have the systems in place to offer them rehabilitation.